Hi everyone, it's Atuksha from Simple Crowdfunding, and for today's interview, I'm here with the lovely Pete Craig from simplyconscious.com. I met Pete through Bishopsgate Training a while back, and we've had numerous conversations with regards to both property and also about mindset. And actually today, I'm going to be talking to Pete about mindset and Simply Conscious and what that means to him and to the people around him. So thank you so much, Pete, for joining me today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
Pete, before we get talking about mindset and the different aspects that you focus on, can you just tell the audience first about your background and your journey to date?
Sure. Yeah, so I've been an owner, operator, and C-suite manager of businesses for 30 years now. My first management engagement was at the age of 18 when I became one of the youngest nightclub managers in the UK, part of a team that managed an empire that at the time was worth about 10 million pounds. So that was back in 1988, 89.
Wow.
And I stayed in the leisure sector until I was 22, so from 18 until 22. And since then, I've managed and owned businesses that span recruitment, manufacturing, events, e-commerce, fintech, other startup businesses, and consulting companies. So I've got I refer to myself as a generalist. I've got a lot of experience in running businesses in lots of different industries. And these were typically not necessarily small businesses, but businesses anything from 100,000 turnover to 10 million turnover, anything from 1 or 2 members of staff to 40 members of staff. And they were businesses that were privately owned, so they weren't corporates, which then means that typically you end up working a lot of the roles within a business, and so you have a broad understanding of how each section within a business operates. So that's why I refer to myself as a generalist. I'm the Swiss Army knife of business, if you like.
And throughout, and I recall vividly a lot of our conversations, everything that you do, you focus on mindset, don't you? And you implement mindset and positive energy to everything that you do. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So I'll rewind a little bit, because actually I guess the key piece is communication.
Okay.
And out of that, comes I learned this ability to be able to, or this awareness of how important mindset was. So imagine at age 18 going into a position where you're running a nightclub, and pretty much everyone you come into contact, whether it's customers or whether it's members of staff, are all older than you. You very quickly have to learn to communicate at various different levels. So you have to be able to communicate to someone who's drunk. You have to communicate to someone who is perhaps in charge of security. Then you have to communicate to bar staff, then suppliers, then senior management, then CEOs, founders and owners, investors, all of these types of things. So you have to learn very quickly to be able to communicate at lots and build rapport quickly at lots of different levels. And it was that really gave me a grounding, and then an interest in people and how we can perform at our best.
Interesting.
And as a result of that, that then led me on this path, both of personal development, but also spiritual growth and spiritual inquiry, which is where I then started to look at how do we maintain ourselves, how do we look after ourselves, mentally and physically, and to a large degree spiritually as well. So how do you intertwine all of those things in order to be the best and the most rounded version of yourself that you can be? And then what are the benefits of that? So over the years, I've looked at that and explored that and tested different ways and observed how I react in certain situations.
And what have been the key learnings? So you mentioned the benefits
Mm.
of personal development and awareness.
Yeah.
How has that affected what you do through life in general?
Yeah, I think, once you have awareness, and this is um, awareness of the thoughts that come into your mind, and awareness of the words that you speak,
Mm-hmm.
and like trying to create these little pauses, these moments of breath, if you like, before you speak. So you have a thought, and most people just then react and speak. Whereas actually, if you just take a moment before you speak, then that moment of awareness allows you to communicate in a different way, and it also allows you to understand what things and what people trigger you and create a negative reaction from you. So this for me, it's always been, for a long time, it's been about actually only trying to work with people that have a similar mindset to me, people that I can bounce off of nice and easily, and people that don't bring my mood or my energy down. So this is about trying to keep my energy at a certain level so as I can operate effectively, and so as I can maintain a level of happiness as well.
Absolutely, and that's key, isn't it, to
Mm.
everything that we're doing. And I think there is a movement, isn't there, in terms of people are looking for personal development and peace, I suppose, in terms of their everyday lives. Everything is so busy.
Yeah.
It's trying to find that quietness and that stillness at some point for themselves. Have you
Yeah.
noticed that? Is that something you come across more and more?
Absolutely. 10, 20 years ago, you'd find yourself in a very small group of people that were looking at this, but now it's much more widespread. The growth of yoga, of meditation, of technology, so apps that can teach you meditation, and all of these types of things has just served to increase people's awareness of all of these different practices. And these practices aren't new; they've been around for centuries. But yet we're only just starting to realize that actually these people that taught this stuff all those years ago, that perhaps they were onto something. Perhaps there was something that was right about this. They weren't doing it just because they had nothing else to do. They were doing it because it gave them a certain peace, a certain ability then to function in the world. And right now, we're in such a fast-paced world, and that's why this lockdown, this imposed lockdown that we've been on recently, for many, and certainly for me, has been a breath of fresh air, because it's almost like if you take time off, you run a business, and your business partner is also your husband, so
Mm-hmm.
it becomes very difficult to take time out. And it also becomes very difficult, or we tend to beat ourselves up then if we do take time out. We feel guilty for not doing something. Whereas actually what this situation has done is allowed a lot of people this elongated period where they can just relax and breathe for a change, knowing that actually they can't do anything. If they've been furloughed, there's nothing they can do. They don't have to worry about anything. And that space that creates, it allows people then to start to think about, okay, so what is important? What is important to me? Do I want to continue working in the way that I have been working? It's almost like the whole world has slowed down.
And you've really enjoyed that, haven't you? You've really enjoyed having that time of reflection.
Yeah, I've loved it. I mean, it was an opportunity really to reflect, and I'd been doing this for probably 6 months prior as well. So I was doing an audit, if you like, of my life and what had been going on, and what it was that I really wanted to continue doing. And this just gave me even more time to do that. So that I spent a lot of time in meditation, a lot of time in self-reflection, a lot of time speaking to friends to kind of get their feedback on what it was that I was thinking, what it was that I was experiencing, to try and not validate, but just get some feedback. And feedback's important, and too often we don't ask for honest feedback. And we don't have those groups of people around us either who will give us honest feedback. If you look around you, many of the people that are around us who like us, or are friends, or colleagues, perhaps they work for you, they will tell you what they think you want to know, when actually that's not very useful. What you need is a group of people around you who will actually give you honest feedback about how you're behaving, what it is that you're saying, how you're showing up. Because it's only when you get that proper reflection that you're then able to make changes.
And does that take a certain type of person to be able to give you that feedback? I suppose my question is tied to, you only see what you see. And so are there some people who, they'll do the best for you, that they want to protect you, but there are others who actually see more? And does that have a place or not?
So this comes primarily from coming back to who you are. If you can learn to strip away, if you can look at yourself and you can identify the masks that you wear in certain situations, and you can start to question why those exist and whether they actually serve you as a person. And if they don't, start stripping them away. As you strip those away and you get back to the essence of who you are, then actually what happens is you then repel those people who aren't willing to see you in that way, and you attract people who are. So then you're attracting people that have been through a similar process, and do applaud you for having the bravery to strip everything away and go out into the world as you, not go out into the world with a mask of what you think people expect you to be like.
Absolutely. And I want to take it back just one step for a second. You talked about, being able to take a breath and then having that pause before responding, or before certain situations which may where you may feel under pressure. How do you do that? If someone is not, or if someone is new to this whole concept, what do you need to do in order to be able to do that, and to consciously know that that's what you need to do?
I think the first step to all of this is, as we kind of mentioned earlier, is awareness. So you need to become aware of what it is that triggers you, what it is that perhaps makes you angry, or causes you to react and respond in a certain way to someone. So we all have things that if someone says something, we've got a belief around that, and if someone says something that's opposite to that, it causes a reaction, and we instantly want to come back and argue that point. Once you understand what those things are, then you can start to just train yourself slowly to notice those things. And as you notice that thought coming into your mind, then it's a case of, okay, so I see that coming. Now I'm going to take a breath, and then I'll respond.
So the awareness is the awareness of your reaction to situations, or to people, or to conversations. So is that true?
So the first step is awareness of what it is that triggers you, so how you react to certain things. And then the second level of that is then becoming aware of your thought around that thing, so your thought around the reaction. So first of all, you understand, okay, so if I'm speaking to this person over here, I know that they're going to say something, just because I don't like their voice or whatever it is, that's going to trigger me. So that's the first step. then as you're interacting with that person, or if you come into contact with that person, you're that physical seeing of them will trigger a thought. Yeah, those are subconscious. It's becoming then aware of that thought that comes into your head and making a conscious decision not to verbalize that, or not to act on it, not to react to it, and instead to do something different.
So is that a thought and a feeling, or because certain things will make you feel very differently, won't they?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Are those two grouped together, or is there another level as well?
So they're connected, 100% connected. So essentially, and Joe Dispenza talks a lot about this, especially in his book, breaking the habit of being you. And he talks about this idea that your thoughts become feelings. And what happens is eventually those feelings then take over. So quite often you'll find yourself just seeing someone, and actually you'll start to feel your body will constrict, or if something might happen, or if it's someone that you love, or you've really got a lot of time for, you'll feel your body kind of relaxing. Well, that's then an emotional and a feeling kind of response that didn't have to be triggered by the thought. Yeah. So those two are very linked. So it could be a feeling. You need to recognize the feeling, or it could be a thought and you're recognizing the thought, but the two are linked.
Okay. And then with regards to, you mentioned attraction and attracting the right people. So this is the law of attraction, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been scientifically proven now that there's an energetic field to each of us. Yeah, and that energetic field comes primarily from our heart region, and depending on how you behave and how you act, you put out a certain frequency, and that frequency then attracts certain things. It's a little bit like a magnet. You put a magnet one way around, and the two pieces stick together. You turn it, and they repel each other.
Yeah.
And this is the same with us. We have an energetic field, and we'll either repel people or we'll attract people. Which is why sometimes as people go through a process of change or transformation, or some people go through personal development processes, Tony Robbins and those types of things, and people start to change. Quite often that will then throw up negative reactions from friends and family who aren't experiencing that same thing. And sometimes those can be permanent. If that person's not ready to change with you, then that can be a permanent permanent change in your friendship.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, and that is the reality. Sometimes we need to look at our circle if we're looking to achieve something that's up here, but right now we're here. If all of the people around us are at this same level as well, then it's very difficult for us to get to this point. So we need to constantly be looking at and evaluating our circle of friends with a view to are these people going to help me get to where I want to get to?
Yeah.
And it's not about being cruel. It's not about cutting people out. In a nasty way. This is about letting people go with love. It doesn't mean you don't love them anymore. It doesn't mean you don't like them anymore. It just means that they don't serve you anymore.
Yeah.
And it's time for you to move up. And if they're not ready to move with you, then you have to cut that cord, and you have to let those people go.
Yeah, because until you do what you want to do in terms of fulfilling your aspirations, there's always going to be a block within your own body, isn't there, and your own mind.
Absolutely.
Because you're always reaching for bigger stuff, but and I imagine the frustration of that as well, in terms of wanting to achieve something but not being able to because you're restricted.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I mean, quite often there'll be something that you're striving for,
yeah,
and yeah, it will seem like a struggle. It will seem like hard work to get there, or perhaps you'll get there, and then something will happen that takes it away from you.
yeah,
That's usually, it's either that you're just irresponsible, and you're not very good at what you're meant to be doing, or more often than not, it's just a sign that that thing is, you're not in total alignment with it,
yeah,
and it's not quite who you are. It's not quite what you're meant to be doing. It doesn't quite sit with all of your values and your beliefs. And I'm not just talking about the values and beliefs that we tell ourselves that we have, but those ones that are kind of innate to us, those ones that are the essence of who we are. Those things that are so important that we would never forego them.
yeah. And with regards to having, I'm trying to think about the best way to ask this question. With regards to having awareness and attracting the right energy, does that allow potentially you to achieve more? I'll explain where my head's at with it. So when you're striving and when you're working towards doing remarkable things, there's always so much information, so many things to manage and juggle all the time. By having that headspace, does it allow you to put those into proportion rather than them ballooning out of control in your head?
For me, for sure. I can't speak for anyone else, but for me, absolutely, because it allows you that awareness allows you to put things into perspective, rather than looking at something as a whole and everything being reliant on that one thing. You can look at things more objectively. And the other interesting thing that I find, certainly in my experience, is that that level of awareness then allows me to see what's needed, and see whether it's something that I can do or whether it's someone that I need to bring in. And if it's someone I need to bring in, then actually I don't need necessarily to chase it. The fact that I've got that awareness, it's a bit like the reticular activating system in the brain. When you decide you want to buy a red car, all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. Well, this is the thing, those cars are always there. It's just our awareness has been honed so that we now notice them. And it's the same when you're looking to grow a business, or you're looking to find your perfect partner. The moment once you've got that awareness of who that person is and what that person, then the need that person fulfills, then you start to become aware of different people or different things that might fill that gap for you.
Yeah, and with regards to the reticular activation, I'm just gonna, and you may have a different way to explain it. This is my understanding of it, and please add to it. So there's so much information that our brains take in all the time, every single second, every single minute. Our brains can only actually consciously process a tiny, tiny amount of that. Yeah. Everything else hits our subconscious. We'll decide whether or not it needs to bring it to the conscious or not, and then dump it. So exactly. The thing with the reticular activation is if you are consciously focusing on something, a red car, your subconscious has already seen thousands and thousands of red cars, but it's never ever formally registered in your brain. But because you're focused on that, your subconscious will think, well, you're focused on it, so it must be important. I'll bring it to the forefront. Would that be a fair assessment?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, and that's a really interesting thing. So there must be. I dread to think how much information, especially at the moment, because everyone's electronic and moved to electronic devices, the amount of information that's actually going into our brains and just being dumped is unreal at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, the funny thing is we actually have far more capacity than we use right now. I was reading something earlier this week, actually. It was a study that was done by Dr. George Land and Beth Jarman back in, I can't remember when it was, but they were commissioned by NASA to create a test to test for creativity and creative genius within within people that are applying for engineering and scientific jobs within NASA. So essentially what they were trying to test for was someone's ability to think outside the box, to think of different ways of doing things. And they created this test, and then they thought, actually, could we use this for children? So they did a test on children, and what they found was that at age 5, children have a level of creative genius, or they tap into a level of creative genius that's 98%. By the time they're 15, that's gone down to 12%. By the time,
shocking, isn't it?
By the time you're 31, it's at 2%. Now, this is because what happens is once we go into the schooling system, the brain works in two ways: convergent thinking, so convergent thinking and divergent thinking. The difference between the two is divergent is kind of looking outside the box, so looking for creative solutions, and the other is looking for arguments against it, or trying to prove something. So actually you're rationalizing. And in the education system, we try and teach people to do both things at the same time, or learn both things at the same time, and you can't. So essentially what happens is, over time, because that's how we're educated and because that's how society works, that genius is kind of pulled out of us. Whereas actually, if we, which brings us back to what I was talking about, awareness and breath, if you can then bring yourself back, the quickest way to get back to those higher levels of creativity, those high levels of inner genius that we're all born with, the quickest way to get back to those is to reconnect with yourself. So become aware of this change, and then become aware of your breath and reconnect with your breath, and become still. And as you become still, and if you focus on your breath, and if you actually purposely breathe in a meditative way for half an hour or an hour, you'll notice a difference in the way you feel. It changes how physically you feel. And because it's changing how you feel physically, it's also changing your mental capacity, and it's increasing your mental capacity.
And the reason that people suggest focusing on your breath is because it's the simplest way to actually just clear out all the noise, isn't it, in your head? And I appreciate, especially at the beginning when you start it, your mind will wander all over the place, won't it? But it's just about coming back to the breath, coming back to the simplest thing, and watching it go in and out of your body.
This isn't about, the important thing to remember with that is it's not about stopping your thoughts. You can't stop.
Exactly.
So this is a reality for all of us, is that we have negative thoughts. We cannot stop them. It's impossible for us to stop those thoughts coming in. So the key to this is to recognize the thought, acknowledge it, and then let it go. So rather than engaging with it and having an internal dialogue, just let it pass through. Yeah,
absolutely. And so tell me about Simply Conscious. What is it? What are you doing to help people understand more about awareness and become more present, I suppose?
So Simply Conscious was a project that we launched along with Daniel Wagner, who's a long-term colleague friend. We've known each other and worked together for probably 12 years now. We started this about 4 years ago. and after about 6 months shelved it because it just wasn't the right time for either of us. And in the last 3 months, actually, since the beginning of lockdown, we started to do a few more projects together again, and we just decided or felt that it would, all of what we were doing, our coming together again, would fit nicely under this umbrella of Simply Conscious. And the kind of premise behind this was really just about helping people reconnect with their inner wisdom and ignite their own genius.
Which
So
is
helping
a wonderful
them,
place to be, right?
yeah, and thinking about, okay, so what are the things that over the years we found really help us get into that state? What are the things that calm us down? What are the things that when we do them make us feel in flow? This idea of being in flow where everything seems effortless and everything seems to be going right for you. What are the things that contribute towards that? And we tried to put this in very, very simple kind of English and very simple terms. So things like be still, things like slow down, get real, feel all emotions. So these are all things that allow us to, as humans, that allow us to reconnect with who we are, to reconnect with nature, to reconnect with our bodies, and to come out of the intellect of the mind and into feeling.
Got it.
So it's all about sharing that message, and then the other side of it. So allowing people to ignite their genius. The genius piece comes as a result of that, and off the back of that, we created a podcast called Everyday Genius, which is where I interview people from all walks of life about what it is that they do, how they do it differently, and we explore a little bit about what processes, practices they use in order to bring themselves back to that point.
Got it. It's really interesting what you're saying about flow. I'm listening to a book at the moment called Stealing Fire, which is all about creative or being able to release your creative spirit. And it talks a lot about sort of quietening the mind, and there's a movement growing in terms of people wanting to be more creative and tap into that in particular. And they talk a lot about flow. I just want to come back to the flow piece of it for a second. Can you explain to people what you mean by flow?
I mean, it has different meanings to everyone.
Absolutely.
But for me, flow is that is the experience of everything feeling effortless. So, to give an example, there's a project that we're working on under wraps at the moment, but it evolved so beautifully. And we started Simply Conscious. Simply Conscious put us both into a state of flow. Within a week of deciding, we'd completely rewritten the website, built the website, opened up social channels, and had already kind of lined up 5 or 6 interviews ready for the Everyday Genius podcast. That all happened effortlessly. And that's at times while we were creating the content for the website, we were spending 8 hours a day just going backwards and forwards on the content, getting the content right and stripping it back. If you go onto the website, there's very little text on there. So those 1 page of A4, it took us 8 hours. But that's because prior to that, we'd written 5 pages of A4, and then we stripped it back so that every single word that we wrote had meaning, and every single word was there purposefully.
And that is the most difficult thing to do, isn't it? To write tons and tons of stuff is really easy. It's being able to condense it down to meaningful messages and not have any noise words, I suppose, which is the challenge, isn't it?
Yeah. And to come back to the question, that 8 hours didn't feel like 8 hours. Because actually what we were doing was something that we loved, something that we felt passionately about. And then as a result of that, I ended up someone popped into my LinkedIn feed and it was a 10-year-old boy, amazing guy, young boy. And I reached out to him and said, I'd love to interview you. And I spoke to his mum and just said, look, I'd love to interview Paolo, but I want to get on a call with the two of you first. And from that interview has blossomed this kind of beautiful relationship where, you know, I now know that, you know, he's got four other kids. They're all public speakers. They're all authors. They all run publishing companies. They've all got YouTube channels. They're ambassadors for Brunel University. They're ambassadors for different companies as well as children. So just an amazing type family. As a result of that, we were introduced to another young man who lives in Costa Rica, Daniel Barahona. Daniel's father is actually the partner of someone who I wrote on my list of people that I wanted to interview back in October 2019. So I wrote her name on this list, and all of a sudden now I've met someone who said, you should 100% interview her. So she made the introduction, had a little brief chat with her, and she said, look, she said, normally I wouldn't entertain doing a podcast with someone who is only just starting, who hasn't got a following, you know, because there's no benefit to me. She said, but I will. So again, you know, that door just opened effortlessly, and we did the most amazing, beautiful interview, and she loved it. So all of these things just unfolded very naturally. Yeah. And people have popped into, you know, our awareness just because we're on track, because we're doing something that we're meant to be doing. We feel we're meant to be doing this. This is our path. And as a result, things are just dropping in. People are appearing, yeah, as if to say, hey, I'm here. And it goes back to that reticular activating system and the energy frequency of the body that we talked about. You know, once you're in that state, then you start to see all of these people, you start to see all of these opportunities. And we were just chatting one day, Daniel and I said, it kind of like feels what the state we've been in, it kind of like feels like we've walked into a corridor, and so we've opened the first door, we've walked in, and down each wall there's lots and lots of doors. And as we opened that first door and took our first step in, every single door is flung open. And it's not like before where we felt we've got to find one and go in because in a moment they're all going to shut again. Yeah, these short-term opportunities, these doors are just wide open, and we're free to walk in and out of each one, exploring whether there's something for us in each one of them. And so for me, that's flow. And
it's abundance, isn't it? Yeah. It's having one, abundance, and two, there are times when for some of the things that we do, I genuinely feel like a kid in a sweet shop. Yeah. And it's like, oh my God, what am I going to go for? This is amazing. And it really fires me up. And that's, you know, one of the things that I love about what we do as well. And I get the same impression with what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. And you can see the smile on your face is just like, how you talk about it.
And again, it's an awareness thing. You know, we had a couple of conversations, Daniel and I, talking about different things. And he's commented a few times, you know, look, after we've come off a call, he said, you come alive when you're talking about this project that we're working on now. And I know he does as well, but this is the thing. You don't always see it yourself, but other people notice it. And it's then becoming aware of that. You say, how does actually working on this thing make me feel? How does working with this person make me feel? If it feels like it's hard work, then there's something that needs to be changed. And if it continues to feel like hard work, then it's time to let it go.
Yeah, I agree.
And we've been quite ruthless, is one way of saying it. I think ruthless with love, in cutting people out of what we're doing moving forward. Yeah, because we don't feel, doesn't mean that they're not right. It's just right now they don't feel like a good fit for what it is that we're trying to do.
That's fair enough, and I totally understand that. Pete, why is this important to you?
I've always been a believer that change happens from the top down and the bottom up. So part of what we wanted to do with Simply Conscious was create a space, a container where we set the vibration, or we set the energy frequency at a level that we knew was positive. And then we invite people into that, and the more people that come into it, they get lifted up as well. And then as that grows, it has an impact on their family, then their friends and their extended family. And this is how like change happens, is by infiltrating people at lots of different levels. So one of the things we're doing is now the project that we're working on is with helping children with that, or the next generation, if you like. How do we educate them, and how do we bring them along? So as actually we're talking at the top level to other adults, and then we've got this other thing that's helping us address the youth, the future of humanity. And as we start to create change and exert pressure on those two groups, then we start to create lasting change, not just for the next year or the next 2 years, but for generations. So this is what this is about. It's about creating new ways of doing business, new more open ways of communicating, and bringing us back to who we really are, and helping us all be the creators that that we are as humans.
And actually, it's a really interesting one. I regard it as ripples. So one of the things that, and it completely resonates with me, because whilst in a very, very different space, it's about allowing people to be the best that they can be. We look at it from a financial standpoint and breaking down some of those barriers. You're looking at it from allowing your creativity to shine, and that. But what it is the way I see it is, you'll do something which will affect someone, but you may not see the effect of that change. But actually that person will then go and make that change or impact positively, say, another 5 people or another 10 people. And it's all of those ripples which actually create the most amazing change. And it's starting on those scales. Would that be, do you expect to see that from Simply Conscious as well? Or are you more involved with seeing what that transformation looks like?
Both.
Okay.
Both. I definitely would love to see that happen. I don't necessarily, it's almost like I don't feel the need to see it, because I just know that by doing it and by being that, we are creating change. And that's kind of like enough. By impacting one person, it's a little bit like the R number that they're talking about for this virus. It's a very similar kind of construct. If we can impact one person enough, then that one person, what's the R rate of this? And the goal is to get the R rate as high as possible, not as low as possible. So we want the message that we're putting out to infect as many people as it can, because that's where we have the most impact, and that's where this whole process has the most impact. And that can only be good then for the world and for individuals that live on it.
Absolutely. And do you think now is the time when, and because of the pandemic, because of market forces and the challenges we've had, especially in the UK, over the last couple of years in particular, do you think there is a movement in terms of people wanting to do something different for themselves? Do you think there's a swell in terms of consciousness and people reviewing what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they want out of life, and all of that?
Within large chunks of the population, I believe there are more and more people that I see and that I come into contact with are experiencing that in some way, whether it's directly themselves or whether they're other kind of influencers and leaders, and they're seeing more and more of that within the clients that they serve.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely a trend. I don't even think it's a trend. I think it's just an awakening, to the fact that there is more. Yeah, and I think actually this pandemic has only served to accelerate that.
Yeah.
In the most positive way.
Absolutely. And so if people want to find out more about what you're doing, absolutely go to simplyconscious.com. Can you remind me of the podcast name again?
So the podcast is called Everyday Genius.
Everyday Genius.
It's available under the title of Simply Conscious on iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, .fm, and also via on YouTube. So all of this is accessible via our website, simplyconscious.com.
So everything that people will need to know is available on your website.
Absolutely, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Is there anything else that before we end the interview, is there anything else that you want to share? Is there anything I've missed?
No, I think that was perfect. Hopefully, it was useful, to some of the listeners. This is. I don't believe that any of this stuff should or can be forced. It's almost a calling. So if anyone feels called to to learn more, or they're feeling called to explore their own genius, or want to reconnect with their own wisdom, then I'd encourage them to visit Simply Conscious and just get involved with some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I love having these types of conversations. It's made my day.
Fantastic. It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Atuksha.
Thank you.